Hi, my name is Terry Trimble, and I'm going to be talking to you today about drug addiction, a growing problem with our young people in the United States, and ways to try to gain control of it. Drug addiction is a serious problem, and we as Christians should try to come up with ways to work with our state and local government to try to attempt to gain control of this issue. What if you came home one day and discovered that your 16-year-old son had been using cocaine? Would you feel shocked? Would you wonder where you had gone wrong? You'd always try to raise your children right. You'd always attempted to do everything right, know where your child was at all times. Your neighborhood was a good neighborhood. You thought you knew your neighbors. Your children was always playing with your neighbors' kids, so you always thought your children were safe. They were at school, they were safe. Right? Wrong. Your children can be introduced to drugs anywhere. Anybody can be a drug addict. Anybody can use drugs and introduce your children to drugs. The best thing you can do is when you're at home, talk to your children about drugs. Educate your children about drugs. They're never too young to be told, do not accept anything from strangers, neighbors, anybody unless you, the parent, have gave permission, and you will also tell that child that you have gave the nurse, school nurse, the grandparent permission to give medication to them. I've been a nurse for 5 years working with behavioral health, and most of my patients are drug addicts. And one of the main reasons they abuse drugs is because they don't want to deal with issues and problems that they're facing. So their way to escape reality is to use drugs. And when they run out of money, they'll often come to the hospital trying to get prescription drugs. According to the National Institute of Drug Abuse, one of the most addictive drugs is probably nicotine, which is one drug you probably never think about cigarettes being a drug, but it's the nicotine in the cigarette that's addictive. And it's probably more harmful than some of the other illegal drugs. Not only are the illegal drugs a problem, but people are now getting addicted to the prescription drugs. And when they can't get the prescription drugs, then people are getting prescription drugs and selling them on the streets. Then they're becoming a problem. Now we'll talk about the drug addiction and come up with some ways to possibly try to gain some type of control of the war on drugs. I will now explain what drug addiction is, ways to reach out to your children, and ways to educate your children on drug abuse. So what exactly is drug addiction? It's more than just being addicted to or choosing to use one type of drug. And again, we talked about anyone can be a drug addict. It doesn't have to be a low-class, poor person. And one of the main things that drugs do, and this is where you become an addict, and this is where you have trouble getting off drugs, is drugs will change the chemicals makeup in your brain. The chemical that tends to be worked on is the chemical dobutamine. If you use drugs, the dobutamine chemical stops being, the hormone dobutamine stops being produced. The only time it is produced is when you're taking that drug, and it is stimulated then to produce the chemical. The more of the drug you take, the more the chemical is produced. When you don't take the drug, the less of the chemical is produced. Hormone is produced. Anyway, if you don't take the drug, you become very depressed because you don't have that chemical there. Therefore, when you're at a point where you feel like you need to come off the drug, you have a problem coming off of the drug. That's why rehab and coping skills is so important, because it's really hard to get off of a drug once you've gotten on the drug. We as Christians should reach out to our young people. We need God back in our country. That's one of the biggest problems. This country has gotten away from God. They want God out of everything. We need prayers back in school. We need to reach out to children. We need after-school programs. We as church Christians need to get all our churches together. We need to have after-school programs. We need to go out and encourage each child to attend these after-school programs. This would be an alternative where they would know, they would learn about God and His Son Jesus. They would learn that Jesus died on the cross for them. They would learn that their bodies is a temple for the Holy Spirit, and not to damage their bodies. They would learn at an early age that life is worth living, that there is a reason to keep your bodies pure. 1 Corinthians 6:19 through 20 says, "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit, who is in you, whom you have received?" And they would see that life is worth living, and that there is someone out there who loves them and cares for them. Then there's the proper way to educate your children at home. There's DARE programs, and then there's drug prevention programs. You need to learn to educate your children at home. That's the biggest thing, is to educate your children at home about drugs. You need to have an open line of communication and let your children know to be comfortable with you. Talk about it as often as possible to where they are comfortable with you. So if something does happen, they're not afraid to come to you and tell you about this. Because the drug dealer out on the street that sells your child a drug is not going to tell your child there's side effects to this drug and there's risks to this drug. They're only going to tell you that it's going to make you feel good and that it's going to make you forget everything. It's going to be up to you to tell your child that this drug is harmful and it can scar you and it can cause problems for the rest of your life or it could kill you. So it's very important that you get out and you educate your children. You're going to be the one that needs to tell your children that there's alternatives to using drugs, that you need to get out of the house and get involved in activities when school's not going on. You need to get out and ride your bike. You need to get out and play basketball, baseball. You know, churches have activities where you can have a Bible lesson, have snacks, go home afterwards. You know, there's just a lot of things, a lot of alternatives. Reading, computer programming. There's just a lot of activities we need to get started up to keep our kids busy. Because kids who aren't busy get bored and get out and get into things. And I think that's one of the solutions maybe to gaining some type of control on drugs. And it's like the drug prevention or Norconon.com suggests the solution to the problem is as few kids as possible using drugs is how we defeat a problem. So our goal is we don't want any kids on drugs or as few as possible on drugs. Thank you.